Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Apptrepreneur, and well, a night or two ago was the Game Awards of the year 2020. This is an award show, kind of like the Oscars and the Grammys, that singles out to give out the awards for, best direction, best voiceover, best music, and of course, best game of the year. Now, for those of you who didn't watch it, spoiler alert, The Last of Us Part 2 won a bunch of the awards, a game I have not played, but I've actually finally been playing The Last of Us Part 1. It's been on my shelf for a long time, just haven't gotten around to playing it yet, and I think that game's a masterpiece, so I'm looking forward to finishing it and playing The Last of Us Part 2. That said, I am a little disappointed that, my favorite game of the year, Final Fantasy VII Remake, did not win much awards. It did win the best music, which I don't know if it should for music that's primarily 20 years old at this point, but So anyway, Last of Us Part 2 won a lot of awards. Some people aren't happy about that, but Kotaku, who is becoming more and more of a, I don't know what to call them anymore. I call them sissy journalism. Journalists who get offended by every little thing like holes in the Xbox or the fact that there's a PlayStation 5 coming out during the time of a pandemic, which Sony and Microsoft could not have possibly known. Anyway, Ian Walker, who's our buddy who actually wrote that article that we discussed, wrote another one called Games Made Under Crunch Conditions Don't Deserve Best Direction Awards. Now, we're not going to read this entire thing, but I do want to start out with the general argument. Last night, The Last of Us Part 2 walked away from the Game Awards with 7 trophies, including those for Game of the Year, Best Narrative, Best Audio Design, Best Performance by Laura Bailey as Abby. Laura Bailey is awesome, by the way. Innovative in accessibility, and Best Action/Adventure. Arguments can be made as to whether it deserved those or not, but I think it's pretty obvious that no game that required its developers to crunch, like The Last of Us Part 2 did, should be given a Best Direction award, which The Last of Us Part 2 somehow also won. Now, I'm going to explain what crunch is on this video just because, we're kind of new into discussing video game stuff on this channel, so for my regular viewers who might not know, crunch is basically overtime. They are making a game, they have a set amount of time to make the game. Now what crunch is, when you get close to that deadline, you're not finishing the game, so more hours are added, extra days are added. Sometimes the game is delayed, but usually not, because you have to hit that release date for the stockholders, and the stockholders are expecting that game to come out at a certain time. Crunch, which is very, very difficult on the families and, well, the game developers and the families of the game developers, is widely criticized. Sometimes overtime is not involved in crunch, which I think is pretty illegal, but, that's why it's not a very, the practice is not looked upon very well. And most of the time, crunch can be avoided if things were planned a little better or if games would be delayed, but because we live in a day where things can get patched later, the goal is to try to get the game as finished as possible and onto the store shelves. The old saying that Shigeru Miyamoto had about a rush game, a delayed game is eventually good, but a rush game is always bad, doesn't always hold true now. Now they can release pretty much incomplete games and download a patch later. In fact, Cyberpunk 2077 has launched with a 28 gig download, basically suggesting that the finished game isn't on the disc. So that's what crunch is. And he's making an argument against why games that go through crunch should not win Best Direction. Now, according to the Game Awards website, the Best Direction Award is given for outstanding creative vision and innovation in a game direction design. This description makes it clear that the responsibility for winning or losing this award rests squarely on the shoulders of the people in charge of leading development. In the case of The Last of Us Part 2, this would be director and Naughty Dog co-president Neil Druckmann, who is often credited as the auteur behind the game's success. It's no secret that Naughty Dog subjected its workers to unbelievable levels of crunch to get The Last of Us Part 2 out the door, but that's hardly an innovation when it comes to Naughty Dog or game development in general. Over the years, the studio has seen constant employee turnover as developers crunch on games like The Last of Us and Uncharted, burn out, and throw in the towel. relentless overtime, missed weekends, long stretches of time without seeing your family. These things take a toll on the most passionate artist. I don't disagree with this, by the way. I just want to let you know that. Quote, this can't be something that's continuing over and over for each game because it's unsustainable, one of the Last of Us Part 2 developer told Kotaku earlier this year. At a certain point you realize, I can't keep doing this, I'm getting older, I can't stay and work all night. Now, Ian does give like a little bit of Naughty Dog a day in court. Let's be clear, the existence of crunch indicates Oh wait, no, he doesn't actually. He says, let's be clear, the existence of crunch indicates a failure in leadership. It's up to game directors and producers to ensure workloads are being managed properly and goals are being met. If workers are being forced to crunch explicitly or otherwise, it means the managers themselves have fallen short somewhere, either in directing the limits of their existing staff, fostering an environment where overtime is implied if unspoken requirement, or both. And as ambitious as The Last of Us Part 2 director Neil Druckmann and his projects may be, questionable experiments in the realm of pushing human limits are not required to make a great game. Now, I agree with that, but I also disagree. Here's the thing. A director, in a sense, is a manager. He's managing the set, or he's managing the crew. He's telling people what to do, how to do it, all that jazz. But here's the thing. The director is still not necessarily the one in charge. The one in charge is the studios. It's the CEOs. It's, in some way, the stockholders who require that a hit game hit its targeted release date because, they have projected to make a certain amount of money selling a certain amount of copies on that day. And since we've come to the point where you don't need to delay games anymore, you can fix a game later. See games like Final Fantasy XIV and Sea of Thieves, which were met with very lukewarm reception at first, but then were fixed later to be good games. Well, they're like, get it out there. We don't care. Now that I do not believe is the director's fault. It really isn't the director's fault. The director has a vision and he is managing the team within the confines he is given. If he wanted more time and the studio agrees to give it to him, like Hideo Kojima got. Hideo Kojima is actually a good example. He's a director, and he did need extra time. Now, because he's Hideo Kojima and he's directing Metal Gear Solid, Konami was, at the time, more than happy to give him extra time to make sure the game was complete. Neil Druckmann might not be given that same freedom. He might have asked for extra time. Crunch time is certainly a practice that needs to come to an end. But to say that Druckmann doesn't deserve an award for Best Direction is a very, very ludicrous argument. And the reason it's a ludicrous argument is because the Game Awards are judging the direction not by the crunch, but by the final product. They look at the game, they look at the art style, they look at the sound mixing, they look at the gameplay mechanics, they look at the fact that the director told the game developers to do this. Let's try this gameplay mechanic. Let's have the character look and sound like this. That's what they're looking at. And under those circumstances, Neil Druckmann, and I haven't played the game, but based on the last game, probably deserved the Best Direction Award. But of course, this is what Ian Walker from Kotaku does. He makes these arbitrary arguments on things that don't relate. Much like his argument that, you should feel guilty about buying a PS5 because there's problems in the world. No, you don't. You do not need to feel guilty about buying a PlayStation 5 because there are problems in the world. If you have the money and it's going to bring you a little bit of happiness, you do it. And by the way, I finally played the PS5, a little bit of Spider-Man Miles Morales at my brother's yesterday for 20 minutes, and yeah, it's awesome. But that's not where the story ends, because the Duke Nukem co-creator, George Brossard, actually really stepped into it with this Twitter feed that he says, "Oh, F off. You have no idea what it takes to ship world-beating AAA games, and you take the word of disgruntled ex-employees versus the hundreds that are happy out there. Also, comparing a 20-man indie to a 300-person studio is stupid." Now, George, who co-created Duke Nukem, and That Duke Nukem Forever was definitely a game that was not suffering from crunch. That game got delayed way beyond what it probably should have. He has a point. You know what? The Last of Us Part 2 is not some little indie game. It requires hundreds and hundreds of people. Neil Druckmann has to manage those people, and he has to get a product out there for a release date that the studio is insisting on. Here's the thing, Druckmann also works overtime during this crunch time. You think he's entirely happy about it? Probably not. But hey, he has bosses too, and those bosses said, get the game done in time. Now, this was taken by most people as a comment that basically said, screw the developers, the studios are fine to do this. That's not what he was trying to say. In fact, he did follow up with this tweet that says, I guess I should clear this up. Someone finally suggested they thought my original post was in support of crunch because of the Kotaku headline. No, my original tweet was 100% just about Kotaku being crummy and attacking Naughty Dog the day after they won awards and poor timing. So basically his thing is Kotaku doesn't know what they're talking about, and I agree. They don't know what they're talking about. But again, it's coming from Ian Walker. Ian Walker, I don't know why this guy is writing for Kotaku. He has written now 3 of the most commentary-worthy articles on Kotaku, where basically the YouTube community in general reads the articles and they talk about how crummy this is. Ian, best direction is about the finished game and whether or not it's good. That's all it is. And here's the thing. Do you honestly think crunch is a thing that's just in the video game industry? It is a major thing in the video game industry, but this is a problem for all industries. There are movies that face crunch because they have a targeted release date and they rarely get delayed. In fact, a movie will not be delayed unless there's A, no other choice because the movie won't be finished in time, or B, because there's a pandemic and it shuts the theaters down. I know that, Pixar had to famously delay Cars once, but that's rare. They would not be allowed to delay Toy Story 2, and there was crunch. There were a lot of overtimes. There were some people who got health problems that they never recovered from because they were on crunch for finishing Toy Story 2. This is unfortunately just something that happens in the industry, and like your misguided anger towards Sony and gamers themselves for releasing and buying PlayStation 5s during a pandemic and, tenuous race relations and a transition of presidential power that has not been as peaceful as many of us would like to believe, it's just bad timing and you're taking aim at the wrong people. In this case, you're taking aim at the director who probably did the best that he could. And look, just from the few screenshots, the art direction looks good. I've seen some clips. It sounds great. I played the demo. It plays great. Neil Druckmann is probably the best director of the year. That his game had a lot of crunch wasn't necessarily his fault, and it should not be a subject for disqualification of the Best Direction Awards because they aren't giving the award for that. Those decisions are made above the director, and you should know that because, heck, you're a video game journalist. I don't know. So I might have to actually subscribe to Ian Walken's articles because, boy, this kid writes whoppers for stories. But anyway, I would like to know, what do you think? Do you agree with Ian? Do you agree with George? Have you played the games? Do you think The Last of Us Part 2 is a great game? Do you think it's not? Do you think it deserved to win Game of the Year? If not, what game do you deserve to win? Having not played it, I think Final Fantasy VII Remake should have, but hey, that's what happens sometimes. I would love to know, though. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one. And Merry Christmas.